All right, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Mike Connors, and I'm the Director of Customer Success at Ecobot. This is the third in our webinar series on the convergence of technology and wetland science. Today's topic is GPS receivers and pairing them with field applications. We have a panel of consultants with us today to share their expertise on the topic, as well as a few case studies and the specifics of which receivers they're using and the latest best practices. As always, our host is my colleague, Jeremy Schewe, a professional wetland scientist with nearly 2 decades in the industry, as well as the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Ecobot. We'd like to make this as interactive as we can over Zoom, of course. So please feel free to submit any questions that you have through the Q&A, and we will do our best to address them as they come up, or potentially move them to a Q&A section at the end of the meeting. So let's go ahead and get things started and kick things off with Jeremy.
Great, thanks, Mike. All right, so let me share my screen here. Hey, it wants to move faster than I do. All right, slide things out of the way. All right, yeah, so welcome back for those of you who have been with us in some of our previous webinars in this series of the convergence of wetland science and technology. As Mike just mentioned, today we're going to be talking about GPS receivers paired with field applications. So first and foremost, I wanted to thank Society for Wetland Scientists for again helping to catalyze this webinar series and to see the hunger in our industry to have a better understanding of what technology is available. So today's webinar is partly being kicked off specifically by requests from those of you in the audience who had specific questions about how some of these new Bluetooth enabled receivers work and how those pair with software or applications as they're downloadable on your specific form. So the question often at hand in our industry with scientists as we are adapting to changes in our biosphere, whether it's climate change and potential political unrest to global pandemics and technology. Things are evolving and changing rapidly, and oftentimes we as humans have a difficult time keeping up with our own technology and what those changes are. I know I have my own frustrations with that sometime, and so how do we ease that change? And so I often wonder how Darwin would have done with some of the applications that we're working with today and what he might have to say about things. But I believe that it's in the coin, the essence of things is that we adapt, we shift, and move. Here's a little coverage of what we're going to talk about today. Just going to touch base into kind of what is at the heart of the essence of this webinar series, the importance of digitizing data. Then I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panel and presenters, and then we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into GPS receivers. We're going to define some terms. We are going to look at some of the new constellations that are available through GNSS receivers. Also take a look at how the actual core functionality of these work. And then we're going to hear some case studies from several other colleagues in the industry. And then we're going to see a couple of short pairing demos, some short videos on how to connect your receiver to your device, to your application that you're recording your data in. And we'll have just a quick brief visit to what our next webinar topic is going to be. So I wanted to reiterate the importance of our jobs as scientists for sending biological and abiological data for the purposes of planning and conservation around at-risk or sensitive natural communities. And I believe that it is our responsibility as scientists to continue to help create more digital data, because this is where everything in the world is going, is the ability to take data, to map it, to aggregate it, to lump it, to be able to make decisions for policy, for regulation, for conservation, for planning. And so this is the heart of what we're doing here. We are each in our own way giving a voice to something that is oftentimes has no voice in our legal structures and what I like to call a council of humanity. So here who are some of the, is our team for today, our panelists and presenters. Each one of them is going to have an opportunity to connect and speak with you, both as a presenter, some of them just to sit in on the panel at the end. But looking forward to this share with everyone today. So let's get to the heart of it. We're talking about GPS receivers. This is my favorite old school GPS receiver. We were laughing before we started in terms of how we navigate the world. Global Positioning System, GPS. How do we navigate? And this is, you know, whether you've ever used a compass or not. I hope everyone here at least has used a compass once. But thinking about how that works in creating our relationship to where we are located on the planet, how we navigate, how we get from one place to another, how do we orienteer, how do we triangulate off of objects to find our places. GPS receivers or GNSS receivers help us with that now. So in the last webinar, we discussed this new ecosystem of tech within the context of wetlands and stream science. We received a lot of questions and requests that again prompted today's webinar, and let's take a little bit deeper dive in here. So first, let's define some terms. First and foremost, I think the most important thing here is to identify the difference between a GPS receiver and a GNSS receiver. So most people are familiar, if you can see my little carrot on the field, are familiar with a GPS. So GPS really just is going to cover North America. So when you're looking at some of these new GPS receivers that the rest of our conversation here today we're going to be talking about as our GNSS receivers, they are much more robust and have a much higher degree of accuracy in spatial location because they're also pairing with all of these other constellations of satellites that are existing above the Earth right now, and those are just continuing to grow. And just kind of as a piggyback off the back of that, this is with a little help from Jean-Yves from EOS, giving me some of these numbers. Here's how many satellites sit just in the GPS constellation. We've got 31 right now that are in orbit and functional. But then when we're talking about a GNSS receiver, we get to add in all of these other satellites that we are then triangulating off of in order to give us that spatial relationship to where we are on the Earth. That's 113 satellites as of June 20th that we get to pull from. Now I think that number's gone up a couple, and a couple have been also are not working still, so the number kind of goes up a little bit, kind of comes down a little bit, but we're adding to as we go. But the basic idea here is we've got a lot of satellites orbiting the Earth that are giving us that capability of finding where we are on the planet. This is me a couple weeks ago before I shaved my beard off. I was out in the field. I couldn't figure out how it worked. I was getting very frustrated, but I know everyone at some point when they're working with tech gets to this point where how does it work? You just want to, you know, I'm just pushing the button. I have a hard time figuring out how what's going on behind the fabric. So we're going to take a little bit deeper dive. How does a Bluetooth-enabled GPS receiver, or GNSS receiver, work? So this is what you need. You need you need a piece of hardware. You need a smartphone or a tablet, something that you can pair. And then you need an application, something that allows you to tie whatever your Bluetooth-enabled receiver is to that device. And then finally, you're going to need, you know, and that's just going to give you spatial information. After that, what you're going to need is some sort of application to actually record whatever data it is that you're out in the field to record. And so you need your phone or your tablet, you need your Bluetooth enabled GPS receiver, you need some sort of application that allows you to tie those two pieces of hardware together, and then you need another piece of software or an application in order to record data. So in respect to our conversation today and some of the hardware that we're going to cover, these are the best applications in order to allow your hardware to be able to communicate with your GNSS receiver. So today we're going to be seeing case studies from the R1 from Tremble, from the SX Blue, and also from the EOS Aero series. The Jupiter's Geode we're not going to be discussing today, but that's another great one that people in the industry are using as well. And then these are some of the applications that we're going to be hearing about today from our presenters in respect to actually then collecting their data in respect to wetlands or stream science, and how that then is directed into reporting into what most of your all's final output or your products are going to be, either for the regulatory industry or for whoever your private clients or industrial clients may be. And so today, again, I always got to throw a little Star Wars something in here, but today we're going to hear case studies from 4 different consultants. 3 of them are going to be in respect to wetlands, 1 in respect to streams. The case studies we're going to look at are going to see how those Bluetooth enabled receivers pair with the hardware and then with the applications for creating efficiency in the workflow. One of the things that I'm most excited about is this evolving tech for our industry. When this webinar was first kicked off or created about a month ago, my company Ecobot was just releasing our ability to collect map units or wetland units inside the map viewer in our partnership with Esri. And so today, the case studies that you're going to see are going to be looking at how Collector is syncing up with hardware, and how Ecobot, in most of the cases, is being used to actually collect the delineation data. But what I'm really excited about is within the next month, we'll probably get to see a lot more case studies where we'll get to see people in that partnership with Ecobot and Esri be able to create the actual wetland units within Ecobot itself. So we're very excited about that journey forward with Esri. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. And so Caitlin is coming in from just outside of Chicago. So Caitlin, why don't you go ahead and bring yourself in and take yourself off mute and just tell me when you want me to advance the slide.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So my name is Caitlin Burke, and I am an environmental consultant with Gawald Hamilton Associates. So I do primarily wetland delineations, been doing this about 8 years now. And the tools that I use to perform the delineations are the R1 receiver, which you can see I took a nice selfie. Doesn't everyone take a selfie with their receivers? And I use that with both the Ecobot software and the ArcGIS collector. Go ahead, Jeremy. So my case study this is a site up in Volo, Illinois, which is in Lake County. As Jeremy mentioned, my company is located just outside of Chicago. So most of my delineations are done in the Chicago area. So this was about a 90-acre parcel of farm field. So we had a combination of farmed wetlands and just regular wetlands that have been farmed around. So I was out there just for a typical delineation, determining the extent of all the wetlands and waters of the US. Typically for a job of this size, I would expect to spend the whole day on site, maybe more. So, I've just recently started utilizing the Ecobot app for my wetland data collection. And especially for this site, it was very fun to test out because of how many wetlands are on site. Usually I'm going out to delineate 1 or 2 wetlands at a time, but we had 7 separate wetlands on this site. So that was 14 data points that I collected with Ecobot. For my boundaries, I've been using the Esri collector app and pairing that with the R1 receiver, as I mentioned. So the GNSS application that I use is called GNSS status. So I'll use that with the receiver and then, like I said, use collector to actually grab the points and connect those points in GIS to create the wetland boundaries. Okay, next slide, Jeremy. So then, you know, the direct impact of being able to utilize this technology was, I believe I got to this site around 10 a.m. I had another site before that, so I didn't get out there as early as I wanted to, but I still got the entire site delineated before the sun went down, which is always the goal. So that was about 6 hours of field work, just myself doing the field work. So that was very efficient. Saved me a couple of hours in the field, and back in the office, about 4 hours of just not having to type in that data into my Army Corps data forms. It's automatically in there from Ecobot when I was collecting it in the field using the Ecobot app. So, you know, I am the only environmental consultant at my company. So this really helps me be efficient and finish this job quickly so then I can move on to the next job and, you know, profit a little bit more just because of the time that we're saving. So that wraps up my case study.
All right, thanks, Caitlin. All right, so we're gonna jump over to Olivia.
Hi, it's a great picture. Hi, my name is Olivia Haney. I'm an environmental scientist. I work for Burns & McDonnell. It's an engineering and consulting firm headquartered out of Kansas City. We do a lot of field work. I'm pretty consistently in the field, so we really use our devices very heavily, frequently, and use them pretty hard, I would say. So we use the ISX Blue receivers. I focus on wetlands and streams primarily. We also will use them for T&E species recording habitats and potential roost trees or sensitive areas, anything like that. We'll use these receivers for. And I pair it with the Collector app and also the Ecobot app. You can go ahead, Jeremy. So for this case study, I wanted to discuss, this was a little over 1,400 acres wetland delineation in north central Texas for a proposed renewable energy project. This was probably like one of our smaller projects or mid-sized projects. The purpose was just to do a traditional delineation, determine the full extent of jurisdictional wetlands and other waters of the U.S. In total on this project, we collected 32 wetlands and 14 streams, varying in size and scope. For this project, it was myself and a field partner, and we had 2 receivers, so we were each able to connect a device. That first picture that I showed or the picture of me, I should say, has a Windows tablet, so we'll use that to connect. I prefer to use my phone personally. I have an iPhone, and so I connect to my phone and have Collector and Ecobot both stored on my phone. We've also connected to Samsung tablets and Android phones as well. So my field partner used an iPad, and I had my my iPhone connected as well. Collected the offline field data through Ecobot and then also through the offline downloaded area on Collector. to collect our wetland and stream boundaries, our sample plot locations, and then also photo points that included georeferenced photos in the collector app. And the output that we got from that was shape files that were ready to go. Basically, as soon as I synced up my data and sent it back to the cloud on ArcGIS Online, and then also these georeferenced photos. Okay, go ahead, Jeremy. So this just shows a little bit, some screenshots of what the app, what collector looks like on my phone. When I'm looking at it, that shows some of the sample plots and wetlands that were collected, as well as a stream and fringe wetland area up on the north side of that picture. We completed the delineation. I believe this we did in 2.5 days. And I remember this was definitely a rush to the end. We worked up to the very last hour before, and we went straight to catch our flight back home to KC. So we really maximized our amount of time out on the in the field. One of the best features that I like about pairing my my GPS receiver with the collector app is having the ability to tag my photos and georeference them, and they're saved within collector. And so I know exactly what photos are tied to each sample plot. The pictures I had from the slide before are from streams and from a sample plot that was taken within a PFO wetland. So having those tied directly to the points is really helpful. This device, I have it here with me. I can kind of hold it up. It's pretty small, handheld. And then we just pair it to the receiver that sits on top of an antenna, but it fits in my backpack, and I don't really have to repair it very often. It works well in forested covers or forested canopy. The battery life is super long. It lasts for a full like 10 or 12 hour day in the field, and I haven't had any issues with this device overheating. Especially on really hot days. I've done a couple delineations in Southwest Oklahoma that got really hot, and an older device we used tended to overheat a lot, so we would have to take a lot of breaks, which was probably good for us health-wise, but slowed down the delineation a little bit. But impact-wise, the accuracy is really unparalleled from what I've seen. On another project within kind of the Plains region, I was getting down to 7-inch accuracy. So that's pretty impressive. And then the speed is just is really convenient, and that just allows for a larger project load and less time between surveys, since we don't have to do a lot of post-processing with this. And that is what I have.
Great, thank you. Great. All right, so now we're going to go to Kyle.
Hey everybody, this is Kyle Houch. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Work for Kimley Horn, a large private civil and planning firm doing anything from aviation to landscape architecture and solar and energy and telecom these days. And last but not least, water resources and environmental consulting. Myself, I mainly work on stream restoration mitigation banking sites for some private clients. We also have different municipal clients we do some stream restoration and greenway design for. I have mainly been using the Trimble R1, like we've already seen, paired with a phone or tablet, and using the collector app. Been getting about like 18-inch accuracy recently. And we've mainly used that just for collecting different data out in the field with the collector app, and then also capturing 360 photos and creating some virtual tours of stream corridors. So next slide, I guess, Jeremy. Yeah, so I have 2 case studies actually. I'll try to go pretty quick. First one is a large stream wetland mitigation bank. For a private client, we're doing the design and permitting and everything associated with that for that project. We use the collector app mostly just for existing conditions, site assessments, anything and everything from photo points to noting areas of stream instability to wetland delineations. If you click on that link, kind of give a example of what I'm talking about. Nice. So with the R1, you know, if it's connected to the phone, any photo has that level of accuracy, just spatially. So it provides us a really nice tool for just, you know, knowing exactly where things are in the field and on the site. And then we can just throw everything onto a web map or web app, and anybody and everybody has access to it at any time in the project. Just, you know, really beneficial when it comes to you know, you're back in the office and trying to figure something out, or find where something is, or make a decision, and you can just look back at the data you've already collected, and it's really accurate spatially wise. So that's primarily what we have been using the R1 for. Second case study, in the last year or so, we got a 360 camera, and that's Ricoh Theta V. It basically just has two cameras on it, one on the front, one on the back, and they're fisheye lenses, so they poke out a little bit. And then, you know, when you take a picture, it stitches those together to make this kind of 360 like orb that you're looking through. So what we did, we took the Trimble R1, you know, kind of duct taped it to a pole, and mounted the camera at the top. And this was all connected to an iPhone. And then we put that pole in a canoe and floated down a creek in Mecklenburg County. And this was all with the intention of, you know, kind of mapping the creek just photographically, and also doing a B-high assessment or bank erosion assessment. So what you get, as long as, you know, you have accurate points, your 360 photos are geospatially where they're supposed to be, and pointing the right direction, you can, you know, with a little bit of post-processing, link them all together, and basically create a virtual tour of the stream corridor, or any, you know, doesn't have to be a corridor, it could be a site on grid. But you get this really valuable tool at the end of the day that, you know, the clients love it because they're able to step through the project site. You can look back at any time and kind of scroll down through your path and see, you know, do different assessments or whatnot, or make decisions that might have required you to be in the field. To, you know, you can do those in the office now. Yep, and that's basically it.
Great, thanks, Kyle. All right, let's jump over to Scott then.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Dunham. I work for Environmental Solutions and Innovations. We are an environmental firm that specializes in T&E surveys and 401, 404 permitting, mitigation design, and monitoring. And we pretty much do it all over the U.S., so we get a lot of field experience all the way across. I'm our wetlands and permitting manager. I'm based out of Ravenna, Ohio, where our headquarters is out of Cincinnati, up this way. We use a lot of different applications. We do ArcGIS, we use Collector, iNaturalist, Survey 123. Lately I've been trying to pair things with Ecobot and using that a lot. We use the EOS series, so we have the EOS Aero unit 100s, 200s, and the new gold units that they came out with. Go to the next slide, Jeremy. So we've been using it for this one, I'll kind of show you where we use Aero, the gold units, or the 200 units with Collector. We've also paired it, like I said, with Survey 123 and with Ecobot. For most of our projects, it's the EOS ear unit paired with an iPad. A lot of times people pair it with their phones as well. We've also paired it with things that are outside of Apple, like Android as well. It just happens to be that it seems to work really good with our iPads that we've already purchased, and we bought a lot of them, so we're kind of stuck with them now. We do mostly with our Waters of the U.S. and T&E surveys. We're able to do PRTs, we're able to do crayfish stuff, mussel things, definitely our wetland delineations and stream. We've even tried to sync up with the new gold units to hit stronger satellites to get, closer to survey grade accuracy for some of our stream engineers on our company. For what's good about us is it works offline and online. And sometimes if you want to get really good at it, you can go to an area that actually has cell service and you can run it live, and which is really nice, so people back in the office can see what you're doing, like Big Brother the whole time. Our data output, we use the geodatabase containing feature classes with our standard GIS shape files and CVS files. Next slide, Jeremy. So for us, you can hook the aero unit onto a pole, similar to other things. A lot of times, poles don't work great for projects that require you to use both your hands, especially when we're working in Virginia or West Virginia, when you kind of have to grab trees and climb your way up a mountain. So we did a lot of practice over the last few years of trying to figure out different ways to hook it up. Basically, it's, a little small box about as big as your cell phone, lengthwise, that has a cord that runs up to what we call a little puck unit. Kind of looks like a small hockey puck. We've been hooking them on top of our backpacks and taping them down and running the cords and kind of wiring the cords in. So it fits right in the backpack real easily. And we've had great reception even in tree canopies. We've been able to move, use our hands, even use a clipboard at the same time, walk around. So we don't always have to use the pole. For us, it's definitely sped us up. We can get everything hooked into Collector really quick, build the maps, put our NHDs on there, or NWYs, any other background information you need. And a lot of times, especially now, we're getting a lot of clients that are asking us for our accuracy. They actually want to see that, our accuracy is what we say it is. So we're able to, take a deeper dive into our GNSS and find out like what our accuracy for these different points were. Sometimes you're going to be outside your 3 feet, but a lot of times we're getting, 8 inches, 12 inches, to maybe 1.5 feet accuracy. So it's been very good for us. It's definitely sped us up in the field, and by able to collect all this extra data into Collector, we're able to put all of our wetland data that we needed to, and then spit it out to a very quick next day or even that day shapefile and data package for our clients. And that's been one good thing when they always ask, well, can you get it back to me in like 5 days? Normally we're like, yes, we can get it back to you, probably within 24 hours, as long as everything's links up correctly. And it's been a lot less QA/QC on the back end for our PMs. And like I said, if you have good data and you're online, you can actually be watching somebody collecting something at the exact same time that they're out there. If not, it's quick for our GIS in the background. They usually just skim through real quick, pull the files out, just see if anything looks a little wonky, and then they pretty much ship it away. I think that's it.
Great, thanks, Scott. So, we're going to just do a quick pause here, and we're going to take a look at how these receivers pair up. So first, we're going to take a look at the EOS. So, Scott, how do you want me to do this? Just hit play, and then you'll talk us through it.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. There you go.
First is like anything else, you need to be able to connect to Bluetooth. So it usually just pops right up, and make sure you're connected. It'll pop down on Collector to make sure you have that. We use EOS Pro Tools to do the hookup. So once you get to this stage, you'll see your coordinates, that it's working. Now you can see your satellites. You can see all the different ones that Jeremy was talking about earlier that we're connected to. and then it'll actually give you a diagnostic if you're not, hooked up correctly or you don't really have strong accuracy. So that's really good to see at the very beginning. It also makes sure that your firmware is always up to date all the time too, which is big. Then you can go to collector if you have collector. And for us, it's you pull it up, make sure that your settings are there. You can put in your accuracy, add in your GPS receivers. So this is a gold unit and a 200 unit that we have in there. Click which one you want. If not, you can add a receiver, like an R1 or something like that if you have that. Makes it really easy. Then you can set your parameters. We build our own EOS profile so that we have the strongest accuracy possible. And then it's all automatically saved right in there for us, which then makes it really easy. And we do this across our company for every project. So we make sure that we're all on the same page. And then at this point, it should be hooked up Bluetooth through your phone. When you're pulling open collector, it should already be there. And you can start actually picking up your features then. And so this is now just an image of me in my backyard actually trying to collect a wetland polygon, and I'm streaming with the Aero 200 unit, which is a good thing for us is that you can stream features if you have good accuracy, or you can just drop points. In this scenario, I'm dropping a point and then going to the other corner. And what's good about it is down in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see your accuracy. So it's telling me I have, 1.4 feet. And that's also a good thing is as you're going through, then you can make sure that you are staying within the accuracy that you requested. And I've actually put accuracy in here, so it will not collect points over 3 feet or 5 feet or 6 feet, whatever you want interval you want to do. At this stage, then I actually hit streaming. And so I was able just to hit streaming and just start walking. And as you can see, it takes a lot more series. It pings the satellites more times all the way through. And I was still able to hold about a 1.2 feet to 1.5 foot accuracy the whole time. In a tree cover, you might see something a little bit different and you might not be able to stream the points, but in this scenario, it connects really good with the EOS receiver and is able to let you manipulate kind of how you want to take your polygons.
Great, thanks, Scott. All right, just wanting to repeat it. Okay, so I did a similar thing. I created a short video on how to pair the R1 to an iPhone and then to an application, so to Ecobot. So in this one, you turn your R1 on just by pushing this button. You see these green lights. First, you see just a battery charge. And then on the left side, that's where it wants to pair. Once you get a yellow flash, then you're going to go similar to what Scott did into your Bluetooth, connect to your GNSS receiver. So now we're connected. The next thing that we need to do is find that application to be able to utilize it. So we use the GNSS status for the R1. Right now, it's just getting the accuracy of the phone in there right now. So we need to go to the home button, select first, and then we're going to choose from the Bluetooth menu, ask it to discover devices once, and then now we can begin the pairing process. So just showing you the video again. Once it's a solid green dot like that, then you know you're paired and corrected. And so you get higher degree of accuracy, and then similar, you can get kind of a rundown of the information of what's being tracked. And so now we're going to pair it to the Ecobot app. I'm going to pull open a project that I had already created. This is just around my house. So all of these data points are going to be, wetland sample points. They're just sample points that we collected. And then those polygons you see were created by walking the boundary and collecting it with the GPS receiver in the phone, or from the GPS receiver paired to the phone. So very, very, very easy, very, very quick, as you can see from both of these, to see kind of a walkthrough of how those work. And then of course your data is being transcribed automatically and updated. So just a couple of quick things before we open up for questions and a little bit of discussion. Our next webinar is going to be focusing on GIS software. So how are we taking what we're collecting in the field and applying that to create maps, but looking more specifically at how quickly, as you probably heard from some of our presenters here, is a lot of times we can actually now create those field wetland maps while we're still in the field on the site because of some of these applications. And I was just able to do that a couple of weeks ago on a project up in Ohio. By 5 o'clock, we had not only completed an 18-point wetland delineation, but we had also sent the finalized, or like the draft final map to the client so they could start their review of that. So that should be pretty exciting to take a look at. So thank you for taking your time for jumping in with us today. Looks like we've got about just under 20 minutes for questions, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of kick us off here a little bit with just kind of opening up a few things. So there was a question that I actually had already been submitted via email a few weeks back in respect to this webinar, and that is, what software do you use to collect a data point with multiple attributes? How does that work? Or can a data dictionary be set up? So I thought maybe I would throw that over to you first, Scott, and then maybe get some feedback from you, Olivia.
Yes, I mean, you can build a data dictionary. We were able to set up pretty much anything that we want in Collector. So for example, just yesterday, I was out on a site, and before I went out, I was telling our GIS guy, I'm like, our standard, delineation features, but I also need to add, inside that, I need to be able to say that they called it this, and then I'm going to call it this. So they called it a PFO before, but I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to make it this. So we're going to building all this stuff onto it. And it also has project number. It has our soil information. So you can build almost a catalog or a small sheet for yourself just in one point. And as Olivia had mentioned, you can take your photos and then attach it right to that point. And in that makes a big difference then too, because then when you take that data output, it actually is named, then your photos are named to your point. And that makes it a lot easier for doing photo logs or anything else that you need at the end, or if you need to get photos out really quick without having to go back through and rename and do everything else. So you can build these attributes in there and then pull them open. And then when they come back out in a KMZ, you can actually have all the information that you took. So similar to stream data, you could have ordinary high water, top of bank measurements, things like that all put in there and then spit out just in one point. So it works really well.
Great. Olivia, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, similarly, we have a standard set up for wetland and stream delineations. We also have a standard for T&E survey. So when I have someone set up a collector project for me, I just say, hey, we're doing wetland surveys and we're doing T&E or one or the other. And then we've kind of got a base model that is available for everything. And then I will also special request certain things, like for an example, a survey I just did last week, we surveyed haul routes as part of our overall survey. So we looked at, we needed to know road type, improvement, if improvements were needed, if wetlands were present, the width of that. So I had our GIS specialists put those all in as fields, and then when we get our output, it's nice when you export it as a KMZ or as a shapefile, you can symbolize it differently. So I can symbolize specifically gravel roads that need improvements, or any variation of that. So it really maximizes your data and makes it very visual and easy to understand.
Great, thanks. So another question that came in is, what is the learning curve for implementing these new Bluetooth receivers? And so why don't we jump up to Caitlin, since you say you're hanging out by yourself in the wetlands up there in Chicagoland.
Yeah, the learning curve. I started off using the Trimble, I forget what it's called, like the giant yellow Trimble that's kind of heavy to carry around. And I thought that was much less user-friendly. I had no idea what to do with that thing. Using the app is much more user-friendly, and then pairing it with the receiver is pretty easy. Like some other panelists said, I talked to our GIS guy, and he walked me through the process of getting connected. And I would say the first couple times in the field, it can be touch and go. So it is good to go practice in your backyard or go practice at the office before you actually take it out into the field and then realize you can't connect. But yeah, it's really easy to get the hang of once you get going. I haven't had a problem with it at all.
Great. Well, so maybe from the other side, Kyle, with you guys having such a big organization, how are you guys finding people are able to roll with that learning curve for the new hardware?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, when I first started using the R1 and 360 camera and different devices all paired to a phone or tablet or whatnot, I think the initial setup and the first time you do stuff, it shouldn't be when you're out in the field trying to collect data or trying to accomplish something for that day. I found that kind of ironing out that process beforehand saves a lot of frustration, and just practice before you actually go out there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so how one of the questions that frequently people ask is, how do you confirm the accuracy of the GPS data that's coming in through the receiver? And Olivia, well, you and I had talked about that a little bit. What do you have any feedback from your side on that?
I don't have a lot of feedback on that, I'll be honest. Okay. We've tested the accuracy before. I know like our GIS specialists have tested the accuracy like as we prior to commissioning a new device, I should say. And so I kind of leave a lot of that up to them, but the accuracy will display on my device, and so I can always check where it's at that time, specifically when I'm out in the field. And then similar, I think Scott was mentioning, you can set your accuracy to prevent you from collecting data unless you have a certain amount of accuracy. But the QA/QC of the accuracy of the device, we typically do beforehand, I think, with the GIS specialists.
Great. Well, thanks for rolling with me, setting you up there. So what I'd love to do is jump over more on the hardwire side of things. I'm thinking of York and Jean-Yves here. So what are some of the available sources for differential corrections, in terms of making sure that what we're looking at out in the field is more accurate, and what level of accuracy can we expect from that? So why don't we start with you, Jean-Yves, and then we'll jump over to York.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. One thing that's important, based on what Olivia says, for example, what is the accuracy of the device? There are many things that affect the accuracy. The first one is that you have to understand that we're talking now about high accuracy GNSS. And when I talk about a consumer grade, we're talking about something that will give us at least sub-meter receivers with any of the devices that we've seen today, either a sub-meter, or in the case, for example, of Scott, he had the 200 and the gold, and we can go down to 1 centimeter. This is one thing that we have to be careful of, is what the receiver reports. The receiver reports an estimated accuracy. Okay, it can be good. Under ideal conditions, it will be good. And as Scott mentioned also, when he goes on the canopy, this estimated accuracy starts getting bigger. So it's a good indication for us of more or less what is my accuracy. But it's not the absolute truth. You can be doing, for example, 1 centimeter accuracy, and the receiver will provide you an estimate, and you might be plus or minus, let's say, 1 or 2 centimeters off with that. Or if the case of sub-meter, Olivia mentioned, for example, 7-inch she was getting, that's a good indication that we're getting good data, but it might be plus or minus all the way up to 2 feet accuracy. So you have to be careful with that. The second thing that affects the accuracy is, am I using differential correction? Because GPS alone, if you don't have any source to correct all the errors that you get from satellites basically going through the atmosphere, the ionosphere, you will get what they call absolute positioning, which is usually between 1, 2, 3, or 4 meters. So you need some way to make your accuracy better by using a source of differential correction. there are multiple sources of differential correction. One of them is, for example, SBAS, which I think that is what most people use. I don't know, in the case of the R1, it was connected to the Trimble network. York probably will answer that question. But WAS is a good source of differential correction. It comes directly from satellites and provide corrections to correct those errors that we get from the ionosphere when we receive the signal. That's very important. That's what differentiates high accuracy receivers from consumer grade receivers. That's why you cannot get that type of accuracy with the embedded receiver on your iPhone or iPad or Samsung or whatever it is. So the source of the differential correction is important also, and that's what makes it better. If you connect it to an RTK network, for example, a DOF or multi-frequency receiver, you go down to 1 centimeter. And the third thing that affects your accuracy is, as we saw again on Scott, he was doing his profile. So you make sure that the coordinates that are output by the receiver are in a proper datum. We most likely very often overlook the datum concept. This is what, for example, in connector, there's this datum shift. If I'm using, for example, WAS, then my datum will be in, for example, ITRF, and it's almost the same thing as Web Mercator. But if I'm connected to an RTK network in the US, I'll be getting data in 983, 2011, and I need to convert that coordinate into Web Mercator. So in two different data, the same point will give you two different coordinates. So you make sure that these are reconciled, because sometimes you'll be looking at your map, why are all my points offset by, let's say, 6 feet to the northwest? That's called the datum shift issue. So this is, when you're doing high accuracy, those important points come into effect. The source of differential correction, and mainly my datum. Am I okay with my datum, and what source of differential correction I'm using? So yeah, there are on-the-fly datum transformation tools available to counter that. But also, last thing, very important, make sure, for example, in collector, those who use collector, define your GNSS metadata in there. It's good to take a point today, but 5 years down the line, I'm looking at my point, what was it collected with? What was my estimate accuracy? How many satellites was I tracking? Was I in differential correction or not? Was I in RTK mode or not? So you have a pedigree of that point. So it's always important when you do your survey in the field to always collect the metadata. I mean, it's all the information around the quality of the point, if you want, in order to have a record of the validity of the points that you've taken in the field. These are the recommendations I would make to make sure you collect good high accuracy data.
Great, thank you. York.
I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add. Those are great concepts that Johnny's presented to us to kind of consider when you're looking at accuracy. From real-time corrections, I think that was one of your questions, the WAS system or SBAS. So we use the term SBAS to create a global for satellite-based augmentation. Here in the US, we call it WAS, Wide Area Augmentation System. It's managed by the FAA, and it's a code phase only correction. So that's important depending on what type of your receiver you're using and what type of accuracy you can expect. So generally, a half a meter to a meter is the best that the SBAS system can provide, because it's code only. And then we switch over to the local systems, like Johnny was mentioning, your local VRS networks, and that's where you get the code and carrier corrections, so you can get down to those tighter accuracies. And then different manufacturers also have global correction networks as well. I've forgotten what the name is for the EOS one, but the Trimble one is called RTX. But several manufacturers have those kind of global correction services now, which support code and carrier. So I think I would highlight just the consciousness that you need to have of what coordinate system your target is. I agree completely about having your metadata stored inside of a collector or whatever application is you're using to know what the coordinate system is that you've collected in. But even starting out, as you're building your project, knowing what coordinate system your target is, so you get things set up correctly. I've seen plenty of times where in collector, in the profile there, in the location profile, it's not been set correctly. That's going to cause you problems on the back end, especially if you're concerned about elevations. You need to accommodate. One of the things that people don't recognize is that GPS, all GPS receivers calculate a height above ellipsoid, so an ellipsoid height, whereas most people want an elevation in an orthometric or a mean sea level. So you need to make certain that you make accommodations for that in the software to get that true mean sea level type elevation that you want.
Great, thank you, York.
If I can add one thing to what York said about
Sure.
the elevation, also one thing to mention is that usually elevation is from 0 to about 2 times worse the horizontal accuracy. So always expect the elevation to be less accurate, more or less to that factor when you're comparing to your horizontal. So, and sometimes if you want to do very accurate elevation, like you want to really have the slope, like Scott was saying, I know he hates that, but you must use the range pole. If you want to get down to 1 centimeter, it's important to use a range pole and measure the height of your range pole. You can enter that in collector and then get your elevation at the ground. And then that's what I have to add to what York said.
Great, thanks. So let's piggyback off that, and you know, so I'm interested. How is, you know, we got to hear from Kyle, so maybe we'll jump over you on this one, Kyle. But everybody else, like, how are you carrying your receiver on the field? Well, Scott, you did it. You told us too. Kyle duct tapes his to a pole, and you've got like some special rack that you put yours on.
Yeah, we started with doing the pole at like pretty much all times, and for our bat surveys and bird surveys and things like that, where we could take the pole and put it down and pull in the data, it seemed to work. Works really well. And if we're doing more like agricultural lands and stuff like that, I mean, we'll definitely bring the pole along and do it that way. It was when we were getting into the real mountainous areas where like we couldn't carry the pole. We did do the backpack version where the pole kind of stuck out the top. And after a couple of times of me getting clipped by some branches and yanking me backwards, I was like, we got to figure something out. So we actually had our GIS guy come all the way down to West Virginia. I went down into a deep valley and I said, we got to work something out where the puck still, you know, can see. And it seemed to be as we basically just kind of taped it, or we started getting the Velcro and like heavy duty Velcro and Velcroing it right down. That way you could run the wiring down into your backpack so you can move around the whole time, still use your hands. I said, but we got to make sure that like we're still getting the accuracy, good enough accuracy for what we're supposed to be doing. And when we were doing stream stuff, you know, those are ones where, you know, based on Johnny was saying with the elevations and things, that's unfortunately, those are times when you need to get, you know, things down into centimeters, that you're going to have to use something like that. And you're just going to have to stick it out and stand there and wait for a little bit and hope that it starts to eat in. But yeah, we've been doing really well, just kind of putting it on our backpacks and roaming around. Some people put it in like a little thing on their hat, and, you know, sometimes, and it's worked. As long as it's flat and it sees the sky, it seems to work really well.
Great, thanks, Scott. How about you, Caitlin? What are you doing?
Yeah, mine is similar to what Scott's been doing. And I just have the R1 receiver. It's got a little clip on it, and I should probably figure out something better, but I just clip it on my backpack strap. And I'm not climbing any mountains or anything, but it's when you get into the stream banks with a lot of buckthorn, I do find myself, you know, only my body can fit into those areas. So like any poles or anything additional is not going to go through, or it's just going to get snagged. So I do find that clipping it on there is the way to go. It has fallen off before, so I recommend like really securing it somehow. You'll know if it's gone because your accuracy starts to go out the window.
or your GPS points just never change.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all in the same spot. I can't figure it out. Olivia, what are you doing?
Yeah, I have my backpack here actually handy. So we have a little pole inside the pack, and this is one of the taller poles, so it sticks out maybe 8 inches above the backpack. And definitely, I've gotten caught on a lot of branches and snapped back, we have this Velcroed on top. So this has fallen off before I've gotten tangled in the wire, but so far I feel like it helps more than it hurts. But yeah, keeping my hands free is definitely a big thing. We have had a case where someone had tied like high vis around the pole, and it ended up going on top of the receiver, and we couldn't figure out why, like something wasn't collecting, and it was because the high vis was over the receiver. So it is easy to accidentally cover it up. So I try and keep nothing near the pole, on the pole, or anything like that, and then tuck as much of the cable into the backpack as possible so it's not getting caught on things. But I have to carry my backpack anyways for water and snacks and whatever else, my Muncell and all the other things I need to delineate. So just having everything in here is pretty handy.
Great. Well, so the only thing I would add is when I'm out in the field using it, I typically clip it onto my shoulder pack as well, as similar to Caitlin. But one of the things that I found works a few years ago, I started off with way out in the field under heavy tree canopy. I'd put my GPS on on like my machete to like try to augment the amount of metal to try to amp it up. I don't know if it really worked or not, but what I did find out was that when I put my Viking helmet on with the horns and I stick it to that I get way better accuracy with that. But so get a Viking helmet, that'll help you out a lot. We're a little bit past our time. I did have a couple more questions that I wanted to throw out to everyone. So if anyone has to go, thank you for coming. And if anybody on the panel needs to jump out, I understand as well. But a couple other questions are about battery life and about using these GNSS receivers under heavy canopy. So since we're at the end of our time, let's talk about time. How is the battery life on your unit? How are you finding that it's working? We heard a little bit from a couple of you, but Kyle, how are you guys finding the battery life of the R1 when you guys are out in the field?
It tends to last, more than a day. I think if it's really struggling to find satellites, I think it doesn't last as long. But just if you're out there for a day or even multiple days, really, you can charge it at night. Myself, I find that it goes for a couple or a few days at a time. I'm not necessarily using it like all day long. I'll turn it off during lunch or whenever. But I also carry just kind of a small laptop charging battery with me. Just if anything does get low or dies, I can plug it in the backpack and it's still good to go. Usually my phone is the first thing to die out of any of the things that I'm using in the field.
All right, great. And Liv, how about you with the SX Blue? How are you finding the battery life on that?
Battery life is great on the SX Blue. I had when I was being trained, a senior delineator told me that if the GPS is dying, you've probably been in the field too long. Like you probably need to call it a day and go home. But this is, I'll see if you can see it. You can check the battery life on here. There's just a little battery button and it'll light up with how many ticks you have. So by the end of a long, hot day, usually I'm at the last rung, so it lasts for a full day. And then I charge everything every night because that's like the worst. I will say, I didn't mention this when I was talking about my case study, but in most of the areas that I'm working in, I have absolutely no cell service, no reception. And so I use this for navigation, like to and from the hotel that I'm staying in, on top of navigating around the project site. So if I don't have the GPS unit, I feel very lost on my project for sure. So I never want that to die. But we have a car charger that we use as well if over lunch, if we're out in a remote area and are running low on battery, we'll charge up over lunch. But typically it'll last a full day. And so if you just charge it overnight, then you're good to go.
Great. Yeah, it was not until I started doing these webinars and hearing the short days that you all work that I realized that I was working. So I always test everything because we were doing like 14 to 16 hour days when we were doing a lot of field work with Kentucky Division of Water back in the day. And so I always have people telling me like, wait, that's almost 2 days worth of work. And I'd be like, yeah, we get it done and we made more in the day. But anyway, we'll jump over from that. So Scott, with the US Aero, how are you guys doing with that charge unit?
We've been really good for the 100 and 200 units. We've been able to go through, 10, 12 hour day. The gold units, We do find that are closer to more like 8 hours because of how often it seems like it's pinging the satellites. So it's really drawing in a lot more. We've been bringing just an extra spare battery out with us and trying to charge it. But the other units, we've definitely been able to go through at least a 12-hour day or more. And similar to, Galen and Olivia, like, after 12 hours, I mean, probably shouldn't be out there anymore anyway. I'm not even sure if I can see what's on the ground anymore at that point to be able to identify anything. But yeah, just the new ones, the goals have definitely given us like stronger accuracy. They just seem to be maybe about an hour or two less than the other units, but we've been very happy with it, which is good because I don't want to have to swap out batteries and do all that or go back and have to charge something. Our iPads die faster than the GPS units do. So that's been probably our biggest hurdle is the iPads.
Yeah, I never leave without like a power pack for my phone. I have like a power pack that has multiple USB ports, so I'll plug my phone or the iPad in at once. So we've got wires going all over the place usually, but definitely the iOS devices die a lot faster than the Windows tablet. I know someone asked me about the tablet. That's another big difference is the Windows tablets have a longer battery life.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we get good life. Sounds like other people are having similar experiences. The hardware or that we're actually receiving the data into the tablets or the phones are oftentimes the things that actually need more of the charge because we're doing more work with that. And just a note to Jean-Yves and York, that what everybody's requesting here is that you make the charge last 8 hours so they have shorter days. I think that's the note to take home for you guys.
Well, there's a trade-off there. I mean, between what you can carry on the field. Of course, you're going with all your backpack and lunch and beer and everything in the field, and you don't want the receiver to be waiting a lot. So it's a factor, like when you have that mounted on the pole also, and it's a carbon fiber rainbow, you want things to be as light as possible. So you're looking at, for example, in the case of the Arrow Gold, it lasts about 8 hours in the field. That's normal because you're not just doing one frequency, you're doing multiple frequencies on 4 constellations. You have a lot of channels for the same battery that's used on the 100, which has many less channels. They still do 4 constellations, but less signals it's using. So of course the Gold will consume more power, but I think a full day of work, as you said, after 8 o'clock, 8 hours, it's time to go back home and relax. But that's why the difference is between, the power consumption of all those devices. It's what they're able to use in the field, how many channels are open to track signals from the various satellites. That's what makes a difference.
Thanks. York?
Yes, I think one question that came in was about the R1 and the battery life. It can be monitored, so GNSS status will give you a level of what the battery reading is, so that app. And we also have the newer Trimble Mobile Manager app, which lets you do coordinate system control, but it also will give you battery level reading as well. It is, I think part of the question was, can you only look at the device itself? So on the device, there are lights, and when you go down to an amber color light, that means the battery level is starting to get a little bit low. But again, on the GNSS status app, you can see battery level.
Great, thank you. So our last question before we fold up here is in respect to utilizing these GNSS receivers under heavy tree cover. So again, first I'd like to hear from consultants, and then we'll wrap up and hear from York and Jean-Yves. So Caitlin, we didn't get to have you jump in on the last one. So I think they've got some trees up where you are. So what experience have you had?
Yeah, we have some trees. It is a little bit harder under tree cover. It takes a little bit longer to get the accuracy. But that could probably be addressed if I had a pole like some of the other consultants have, or something else to kind of boost my accuracy, because I am just using it on my backpack, or sometimes I'm holding it up over my head to try and get that accuracy. But for the most part, it's work. I can get it within several feet, which I think is pretty good. We had mentioned like plus or minus 2 feet that some people have been getting. So but it's always going to be a little bit harder to get accuracy under tree canopy.
Okay. Scott, how about you guys? What are you guys finding?
Yeah, it's definitely, like Caitlin mentioned, it's going to be a little bit slower. So a lot of times, you know, especially if we're like an open right away or something like that, we're able to collect things so quickly. And then we get down there, and then all of a sudden, especially a lot of new guys that are, you know, so used to moving really quick, all of a sudden I'm like, you know, you need to stand there for a second and let it like try to gather, or if possible, you know, if you can, you know, take a lean forward or a lean back just to catch the gap in the trees. You know, you can see like I got a tree gap and I'm, you know, way down in this valley. All of a sudden I have 3 foot of accuracy, but I move a foot to the left underneath the tree and now I'm at 6 feet of accuracy. But it's definitely, that's when a pole does come in more handy when you're down there. It's if you need to take very specific, strong, accurate things, that's good. For a lot of times when you're just kind of bringing in a stream or a boundary edge, you're usually getting that couple of feet either way, like Caitlin mentioned, and that's okay for what, you know, what your purpose is. But it definitely takes a little bit longer if you're going to be stuck under a stronger canopy. You know, you just need to be patient and take your time and realize that like it'll drop over time. It just needs some chance to catch these satellites and find out where you're at.
Great. Liv, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I've worked on a couple projects in Pennsylvania state forests, and so that definitely has heavy tree cover. It's pretty dense, and our accuracy does drop or raise. I don't know what you'd use in that term, but more feet, so it's not quite as accurate. But we definitely have to do a little bit more corrective data management when we get back from the field. So a lot of times you can get pretty accurate with the GPS units, and then for that specific state, Pennsylvania has a really great resource for LiDAR data, and so I compare with contours a lot too, and just kind of check a lot of the data as I'm going, and kind of verify from a spatial standpoint that makes sense. Like, yes, a wetland is here, and it's not on a ridge line, like, even though there are a lot of hill slope seeps in the Pennsylvania mountains, but just kind of recognizing that that's a time that you need to spend a little bit more time when you get back in the office verifying that data if you're getting a little bit worse of an accuracy. But overall, I haven't had many situations where it just like will not collect any data. Like it's definitely getting below 10 feet usually, but sometimes you just got to take a little extra time at the end.
Great, thanks, Liv. So yeah, I'd love to hear from York, you know, different ways that you guys are thinking about addressing and helping out with that in the future, and then we'll go to Jean-Yves and close out for the day.
Sure. I think, you know, working under canopy is always a challenge based on the wide open, and you know, so Trimble's done different things for what we call multipath rejection. So looking about, you know, concerned about satellite signals bouncing and how do you calculate those out. So there's some different technologies that are built to do that. One of the things we recommend is when folks can, you know, stay in the open as much as possible, and then when you have a point that's under canopy, you know, move from the open area to.
You muted there, York. You done?
Once you grab the position, then come back out to an open area. Sometimes that can help the receiver stabilize a little bit as well.
Great. Jean-Yves?
This has been the challenge since the early days of GPS, you know, forestry. Yeah. And different manufacturers, you'll have 20 different manufacturers, 20 different products. They will each behave differently on a canopy. It's how well you tune the receiver to perform, and also what is greatly helping, because when you're on the canopy, you're not tracking satellites directly. You're just a lot of time just getting signals that have bounced. And as York said, how do you detect this? You know, and the accuracy varies because of that. Now, there's many things that come into effect on the quality of the receiver of handling signals on the canopy. You know, you got this receiver sensitivity, but you have to find a balance between the sensitivity of tracking bounced signals and which one are good and which one are no good. And having multiple constellations, for example, 4 constellations, you're getting all those satellites that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Jeremy, that greatly helps. because you get more satellites that you're able to reject in your overall computation at the end. The other point is also keeping a differential correction on the canopy. We're using, for example, WAS signals. And are you able to maintain these WAS signals and keep on providing a differential correction also on the canopy? So different manufacturers will put emphasis on algorithms inside the receivers to make better use of this, so you can have a full day of DGPS work on the canopy. Don't expect the accuracy to be always sub-meter on canopy. You know, depending on the receiver, I can talk only for the IO receivers, but sometimes you should expect probably between close, I cannot say sub-meter, I don't want to say sub-meter either, even though you'll get sub-meter sometimes in real life, but also expect, for example, a few more feet of inaccuracy also, depending on the type of canopy. It depends on the diameter of the trunks. We've been doing testing since 1994, for example, with the Forest Engineering Research Institute of Canada, where in this winter time, all of us in a deciduous tree environment, no leaves, you could see the sky, nobody could track. At that time, it was only GPS. The reason is because the diameter of the trunks were so big, even if you could see the sky, signals was being bounced up, and too much multipath, if you want, as York mentioned, signal bouncing off trunks, preventing that. So diameter of the trunks is a big effect, and the other one is a canopy cover. What type of canopy? Is it deciduous? Are the leaves wet or dry? Spruce, for example, you'll find, even if it's very pitch dark underneath, you might get better response on the spruce. So again, it's a lot of things vary, but inaccuracy is there, of course. So how do you maximize that? I mean, go there, stay probably a few seconds, and then make sure that you work slower, as Scott mentioned. Don't walk like a torpedo on the canopy. Just walk slower because signal is obstructed, and then make sure you watch that estimated accuracy also as you go along. Very important. There are other features also when you really, really want it down to the really high accuracy. There's also the option of using laser range finders also to measure offset points and do some sort of traverse on the canopy, and coupling GPS and laser offset measurements also on the canopy. But overall, accuracy can be good on the canopy. It's just that you have to be careful. Don't expect sub-meter. Especially don't try to use differential correction from local networks, including the carrier phase measurements on the canopy, because you're measuring wavelengths of signal from the 20,000 kilometers all the way up to the antenna. They get obstructed, and you cannot make measurements with that. So it's very complex. I don't want to go into detail, but you have code differential and a carrier phase, as York mentioned earlier also. And carrier phases can be very touchy to use on the canopy. So try to use a code differential source like SBAS on the canopy only.
Great, thank you. So thank you all. I know we had to have a couple people drop off because they had to get to other meetings. And just so people know, this webinar was recorded, and you'll be able to access that through the Ecobot website. And we'll send out links to everyone who had registered to just let them know it was recorded. And I want to thank all of you who helped present today and for helping field questions and helping to further lift our understanding of how this industry can just get better and better, and how we can do our jobs more efficiently. So thank you all again, and yeah, keep your eyes out. And then our next webinar will be about GIS software, and the webinar after that, I believe, is going to be about drones. So stay tuned. Mike, you want to close this up? But I already do it.
Oh, well said, Jeremy. Everything
right.
Jeremy said. But yeah, look out for the communication. We are doing these once a month, usually on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So sometime in mid to late August will be that next one on GIS software. So thanks again to all the panelists and everyone who attended. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.